Preface and dedication and disclaimer to Kidnapped. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Preface to the biographical edition. While my husband and Mr. Henley were engaged in writing plays in Bournemouth, they made a number of titles, hoping to use them in the future. Dramatic composition was not what my husband preferred, but the torrent of Mr. Henley's enthusiasm swept him off his feet. However, after several plays had been finished, and his health seriously impaired by his endeavours to keep up with Mr. Henley, playwriting was abandoned forever, and my husband returned to his legitimate vocation. Having added one of the titles, The Hanging Judge, to the list of projected plays now thrown aside, and emboldened by my husband's offer to give me any help needed, I concluded to try and write it myself. As I wanted a trial scene in the Old Bailey, I chose the period of 1700 for my purpose, but being shamefully ignorant of my subject, and my husband confessing to little more knowledge than I possessed, a London bookseller was commissioned to send us everything he could procure bearing on Old Bailey trials. A great package came in response to our order, and very soon we were both absorbed, not so much in the trials, as in following the brilliant career of a Mr. Garrow, who appeared as counsel in many of the cases. We sent for more books, and yet more, still intent on Mr. Garrow, whose subtle cross-examination of witnesses and masterly, if sometimes startling, methods of arriving at the truth seemed more thrilling to us than any novel. Occasionally other trials than those in the Old Bailey would be included in the package of books we received from London. Among these my husband found and read with avidity The Trial of James Stewart, in Aucarn, in Durer of Appin, for the murder of Colin Campbell, of Glenure, EFQ, factor for His Majesty on the forfeited estate of Ardfield. My husband was always interested in this period of his country's history, and had already the intention of writing a story that should turn on the Appin murder. The tale was to be of a boy, David Balfour, supposed to belong to my husband's own family, who should travel in Scotland as though it were a foreign country, meeting with various adventures and misadventures by the way. From the trial of James Stewart my husband gleaned much valuable material for his novel, the most important being the character of Alan Breck. Aside from having described him as smallish in stature, my husband seems to have taken Alan Breck's personal appearance, even to his clothing, from the book. A letter from James Stewart to Mr. John Macfarlane, introduced as evidence in the trial, says, "There is one Alan Stewart, a distant friend of the late Ardills, who is in the French service, and came over in March last, as he said to some, in order to settle at home, to others, that he was to go soon back, and was, as I hear, the day that the murder was committed, seen not far from the place where it happened, and is not now to be seen, by which it is believed he was the actor. He is a desperate, foolish fellow, and if he is guilty, came to the country for that very purpose. He is a tall, pock-pitted lad, very black hair, and wore a blue coat and metal buttons, an old red vest, and breeches of the same colour." A second witness testified to having seen him wearing a blue coat with silver buttons, a red waistcoat, black shag breeches, tartan hose, and a feathered hat with a big coat dun-coloured, a costume referred to by one of the counsel as French clothes, which were remarkable. There are many incidents given in the trial that point to Alan's fiery spirit and Highland quickness to take offence. One witness declared also that the said Alan Breck threatened that he would challenge Ballyviolan and his sons to fight because of his removing the declarant last year from Glenduror. On another page, Duncan Campbell, change keeper at Annet, aged 35 years, married, witness cited, sworn, purged, and examined at Supra, Depones, that in the month of April last the deponent met with Alan Breck Stewart, with whom he was not acquainted, and John Stewart, in Auchnachwan, in the house of the walk-miller of Auchofragan, and went on with them to the house. Alan Breck Stewart said that he hated all the name of Campbell, and the deponent said he had no reason for doing so. But Alan said he had very good reason for it, that thereafter they left that house, and, after drinking a dram at another house, came to the deponent's house, where they went in and drunk some drams, and Alan Breck renewed the former conversation. And the deponent making the same answer, Alan said that, if the deponent had any respect for his friends, he would tell them, that if they offered to turn out the possessors of Ardheel's estate, he would make black cocks of them, before they entered into possession, by which the deponent understood shooting them, it being a common phrase in the country. Some time after the publication of Kidnapped, we stopped for a short while in the Appin country, where we were surprised and interested to discover that the feeling concerning the murder of Glenure, the Red Fox, also called Colin Roy, was almost as keen as though the tragedy had taken place the day before. For several years my husband received letters of expostulation or commendation from members of the Campbell and Stewart clans. I have in my possession a paper, yellow with age, that was sent soon after the novel appeared, containing the pedigree of the family of Appine, wherein it is said that Alan, 3rd Baron of Appine, was not killed at Flodone, though there, but lived to a great old age. He married Cameron, daughter to Ewan Cameron of Lochiel. Following this is a paragraph stating that John Stewart first of Ardshiel of his descendants Alan Breck had better be omitted, Duncan Baines Stewart in Achendarach his father was a bastard. One day, while my husband was busily at work, I sat beside him reading an old cookery book called The Complete Housewife, an accomplished gentlewoman's companion. In the midst of receipts for rabbits and chickens mumbled, pickled samphire, skirret pie, baked tansy, and other forgotten delicacies, there were directions for the preparation of several lotions for the preservation of beauty. One of these was so charming that I interrupted my husband to read it aloud. "Just what I wanted!" he exclaimed, and the receipt for the Lily of the Valley water was instantly incorporated into Kidnapped. Signed, F. V. Degs. Dedication. My dear Charles Baxter, if you ever read this tale, you will likely ask yourself more questions than I should care to answer, as, for instance, how the Appin murder has come to fall in the year 1751, how the Torren rocks have crept so near to Earraid, or why the printed trial is silent as to all that touches David Balfour. These are nuts beyond my ability to crack. But if you tried me on the point of Alan's guilt or innocence, I think I could defend the reading of the text. To this day you will find the tradition of Appin clear in Alan's favour. If you inquire, you may even hear that the descendants of the other man who fired the shot are in the country to this day. But that other man's name, inquire as you please, you shall not hear. For the Highlander values a secret for itself, and for the congenial exercise of keeping it, I might go on for long to justify one point and own another indefensible. It is more honest to confess at once how little I am touched by the desire of accuracy. This is no furniture for the scholar's library, but a book for the winter evening schoolroom when the tasks are over and the hour for bed draws near. And honest Alan, who was a grim old fire-eater in his day, has in this new avatar no more desperate purpose than to steal some young gentleman's attention from his Ovid, carry him a while into the Highlands and the last century, and pack him to bed with some engaging images to mingle with his dreams. As for you, my dear Charles, I do not even ask you to like this tale, but perhaps when he is older, your son will. He may then be pleased to find his father's name on the fly-leaf, and in the meanwhile it pleases me to set it there, in memory of many days that were happy, and some, now perhaps as pleasant to remember, that were sad. It is strange for me to look back from a distance both in time and space on these bygone adventures of our youth, It must be stranger for you who tread the same streets, who may tomorrow open the door of the old Speculative, where we began to rank with Scott and Robert Emmet and the beloved and inglorious Macbean, or may pass the corner of the Close where that great society, the L.J.R., held its meetings and drank its beer, sitting in the seats of Burns and his companions. I think I see you, moving there by plain daylight, beholding with your natural eyes those places that have now become for your companion a part of the scenery of dreams. How, in the interval of present business, the past must echo in your memory. Let it not echo often without some kind thoughts of your friend, Robert Louis Stevenson, signed in Skerryvore, Bournemouth. And now a disclaimer. Your reader is an American. I'm sorry. I will do my absolute level best to pronounce the Scots words accurately and the names as well, but I cannot promise that they are accurate. Neither can I pretend to a Highland or a Lowland Scots accent. I will make some kind of an attempt, but please bear with me when I fall short. Thank you, and good listening. Chapter 1 of Kidnapped. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 1. I set off upon my journey to the House of Shaws. I will begin the story of my adventures with a certain morning early in the month of June, the year of grace 1751, when I took the key for the last time out of the door of my father's house. The sun began to shine upon the summit of the hills as I went down the road, and by the time I had come as far as the manse, the blackbirds were whistling in the garden lilacs, and the mist that hung around the valley in the time of the dawn was beginning to arise and die away. Mr. Campbell, the minister of Essendine, was waiting for me by the garden gate, good man. He asked me if I had breakfasted, and hearing that I lacked for nothing, he took my hand in both of his and clapped it kindly under his arm. "Well, Davy, lad," said he, "I will go with you as far as the ford, to set you on the way," and we began to walk forward in silence. "Are ye sorry to leave Essendine?" said he after a while. "Why, sir," said I, "if I knew where I was going, or what was likely to become of me, I would tell you candidly. Essendine is a good place indeed, and I have been very happy there, but then I have never been anywhere else. My father and mother, since they are both dead, I shall be no nearer to in Essendine than in the kingdom of Hungary, and to speak truth, if I thought I had a chance to better myself where I was going, I would go with a good will." "Ay?" said Mr. Campbell. "Very well, Davy. Then it behooves me to tell your fortune, or so far as I may. When your mother was gone, and your father, the worthy Christian man, began to sicken for his end, he gave me in charge a certain letter, which he said was your inheritance. So soon, says he, as I am gone, and the house is redd up and the gear disposed of, all which, Davy, hath been done, give my boy this letter into his hand, and start him off to the House of Shaws, not far from Cramond. That is the place I came from, he said, and it's where it befits that my boy should return. He is a steady lad, your father said, and a canny goer, and I doubt not he will come safe and be well liked where he goes." "The House of Shaws!" I cried. "What had my poor father to do with the House of Shaws?" "Nay," said Mr. Campbell, "who can tell that for a surety? But the name of that family, Davy boy, is the name you bear, Balfours of Shaws, an ancient, honest, reputable house, peradventure in these latter days decayed. Your father, too, was a man of learning as befitted his position, no man more plausibly conducted school, nor had he the manner or the speech of a common dominie. But, as ye will yourself remember, I took a pleasure to have him to the manse to meet the gentry, and those of my own house, Campbell of Kilrennet, Campbell of Dunswire, Campbell of Minch, and others, all well kenned gentlemen, had pleasure in his society. Lastly, to put all the elements of this affair before you, here is the testamentary letter itself, superscribed by the own hand of our departed brother." He gave me the letter, which was addressed in these words: "To the hands of Ebenezer Balfour, Esquire, of Shaws, in his house of Shaws, these will be delivered by my son, David Balfour." My heart was beating hard at this great prospect now suddenly opening before a lad of 17 years of age, the son of a poor country dominie in the forest of Ettrick. "Mr. Campbell," I stammered, "and if you were in my shoes, would you go?" "Of a surety," said the minister, "that would I, and without pause. A pretty lad like you should get to Cramond, which is near in by Edinburgh, in 2 days of walk. If the worst come to the worst, and your high relations (as I cannot but suppose them to be somewhat of your blood) should put you to the door, ye can but walk the 2 days back again and risp at the manse door. But I would rather hope that ye shall be well received, as your poor father forecast for you, and for anything that I ken, come to be a great man in time. And here, Davie, laddie," he resumed, "it lies near upon my conscience to improve this parting, and set you on the right guard against the dangers of the world." Here he cast about for a comfortable seat, lighted on a big boulder under a birch by the track side, sat down upon it with a very long, serious upper lip, and, the sun now shining in upon us between two peaks, put his pocket handkerchief over his cocked hat to shelter him. There, then, with uplifted forefinger, he first put me on my guard against a considerable number of heresies, to which I had no temptation, and urged upon me to be instant in my prayers and reading of the Bible. That done, he drew a picture of the great house that I was bound to, and how I should conduct myself with its inhabitants. "Be simple, Davie, in things immaterial," said he. "Bear ye this in mind, that though gentle born, ye have a country rearing. Dinna shame us, Davie, dinna shame us. In yon great muckle house, with all these domestics, upper and under, show yourself as nice, as circumspect, as quick at the conception, and as slow of speech as any. As for the laird, remember he's the laird. I say no more. Honour to whom honour. It's a pleasure to obey a laird, or should be, to the young." "Well, sir," said I, "it may be, and I'll promise you I'll try to make it so." "Why, very well said," replied Mr. Campbell heartily. "And now to come to the material, or, to make a quibble, to the immaterial. I have here a little packet which contains 4 things." He tugged it, as he spoke, and with some great difficulty, from the skirt pocket of his coat. "Of these 4 things, the first is your legal due, the little pickle money for your father's books in plenishing, which I have bought, as I explained from the first, in the design of reselling at a profit to the incoming dominie. The other 3 are gifties that Mrs. Campbell and myself would be blithe of your acceptance. The first, which is round, will likely please ye best at the first off go. But, oh, Davie, laddie, it's but a drop o' water in the sea. It'll help you but a step, and vanish like the morning. The second, which is flat and square and written upon, will stand by you through life, like a good staff for the road, and a good pillow to your head in sickness. And as for the last, which is cubical, that'll see you, it's my prayerful wish, into a better land." With that he got upon his feet, took off his hat, and prayed a little while aloud, and in affecting terms, for a young man setting out into the world, then suddenly took me in his arms and embraced me very hard, then held me at arm's length, looking at me with his face all working with sorrow, and then whipped about, and crying good-bye to me, set off backward by the way that we had come at a sort of jogging run. It might have been laughable to another, but I was in no mind to laugh. I watched him as long as he was in sight, and he never stopped hurrying, nor once looked back. Then it came in upon my mind that this was all his sorrow at my departure, and my conscience smote me hard and fast, because I, for my part, was overjoyed to get out of that quiet countryside and go to a great busy house, among rich and respected gentlefolk of my own name and blood. Davy, Davy, I thought, was ever seen such black ingratitude? Can you forget old favours and old friends at the mere whistle of a name? Fie, fie, think shame! And I sat down on the boulder the good man had just left, and opened the parcel to see the nature of my gifts. That which he had called cubical, I had never had much doubt of; sure enough, it was a little Bible, to carry in a plaid neuk. That which he had called round, I found to be a shilling piece; and the third, which was to help me so wonderfully both in health and sickness all the days of my life, was a little piece of coarse yellow paper, written upon thus in red ink: To make lily of the valley water. Take the flowers of lily of the valley and distil them in sack, and drink a spoonful or two as there is occasion. It restores speech to those that have the dumb palsy. It is good against the gout. It comforts the heart and strengthens the memory. And the flowers put into a glass, close stopped, and set into a hill of ants for a month, then take it out, and you will find a liquor which comes from the flowers, which keep in a vial. It is good, ill or well, and whether man or woman. And then, in the minister's own hand was added: Likewise for sprains rub it in, and for the colic a great spoonful in the hour. To be sure, I laughed over this, but it was rather tremulous laughter, and I was glad to get my bundle on my staff's end and set out over the ford and up the hill upon the farther side, till, just as I came on the green drove road running wide through the heather, I took my last look of Kirk Essendine, the trees about the manse, and the big rowans in the kirkyard, where my father and my mother lay. End of chapter. Chapter 2 of Kidnapped. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 2. I Come to My Journey's End. On the forenoon of the second day, coming to the top of a hill, I saw all the country fall away before me down to the sea, and in the midst of this descent, on a long ridge, the city of Edinburgh smoking like a kiln. There was a flag upon the castle, and ships moving or lying anchored in the firth, both of which, for as far away as they were, I could distinguish clearly, and both brought my country heart into my mouth. Presently after, I came by a house where a shepherd lived, and got a rough direction for the neighbourhood of Cramond, and so, from one to another, worked my way to the westward of the capital by Colinton, till I came out upon the Glasgow road. And there, to my great pleasure and wonder, I beheld a regiment marching to the fifes, every foot in time, an old red-faced general on a grey horse at the one end, and at the other the company of grenadiers with their pope's hats. The pride of life seemed to mount into my brain at the sight of the red coats and the hearing of that merry music. A little further on, and I was told I was in Cramond parish, and began to substitute in my inquiries the name of the house of Shaws. It was a word that seemed to surprise those of whom I sought my way. At first I thought the plainness of my appearance, in my country habit, and that all dusty from the road, consorted ill with the greatness of the place to which I was bound. But after two or maybe three had given me the same look and the same answer, I began to take it in my head that there was something strange about the Shaws itself. The better to set this fear at rest, I changed the form of my inquiries, and spying an honest fellow coming along a lane on the shaft of his cart, I asked him if he had ever heard tell of a house they called the House of Shaws. He stopped his cart and looked at me like the others. "Ay," said he. "What for?" "It's a great house?" I asked. "Doubtless," says he. "The house is a big muckle house. "Ay," said I. "But the folk that are in it?"
"Folk!" cried he. "Are ye daft? They're nae folks there, to call folk."
"What?" say I. "Not Mr. Ebenezer?"
"Oh, ay," says the man. "There's the laird, to be sure, if it's him you're wanting. What'll like be your business, mannie?"
I was led to think that I would get a situation, I said, looking as modest as I could. "What?" cries the carter in so sharp a note that his very horse started; and then,
"Well, mannie,"
he added,
"it's none of my affairs; but ye seem a decent spoken lad, and if you'll take a word from me, you'll keep clear of the Shaws."
The next person I came across was a dapper little man in a beautiful white wig, whom I saw to be a barber on his rounds; and knowing well that barbers were great gossips, I asked him plainly what sort of a man was Mr. Balfour of the Shaws. "Hoot, hoot, hoot!" said the barber. "Nae kind of a man, nae kind of a man at all," and began to ask me very shrewdly what my business was. But I was more than a match for him at that, and he went on to his next customer no wiser than he came. I cannot well describe the blow this dealt to my illusions. The more indistinct the accusations were, the less I liked them, for they left the wider field to fancy. What kind of a great house was this, that all the parish should start and stare to be asked the way to it? Or what sort of a gentleman, that his ill fame should be thus current on the wayside? If an hour's walking would have brought me back to Essendean, I would have left my adventure then and there, and returned to Mr. Campbell's. But when I had come so far away already, mere shame would not suffer me to desist till I had put the matter to the touch of proof. I was bound, out of mere self respect, to carry it through; and little as I liked the sound of what I heard, and slow as I began to travel, I still kept asking my way, and still kept advancing. I was drawing on to sundown, when I met a stout, dark, sour looking woman coming trudging down a hill; and she, when I had put my usual question, turned sharp about, accompanied me back to the summit she had just left, and pointed to a great bulk of building standing very bare upon a green in the bottom of the next valley. The country was pleasant round about, running in low hills, pleasantly watered and wooded, and the crops, to my eyes, wonderfully good. But the house itself seemed to be a kind of ruin. No road led up to it, no smoke arose from any of the chimneys, nor was there any semblance of a garden. My heart sank. "That!" I cried. The woman's face lit up with a malignant anger. "That is the house of Shaws," she cried. "Blood built it, blood stopped the building of it, blood shall bring it down. See here," she cried again, "I spit upon the ground, and crack my thumb at it. Black be its fall! If ye see the laird, tell him what ye hear; tell him this makes the 1219 time that Jennet Clouston has called down the curse on him and his house, byre and stable, man, guest, and master, wife, miss, or bairn. Black, black be their fall!" And the woman, whose voice had ridden to a kind of eldritch sing song, turned with a skip and was gone. I stood where she left me, with my hair on end. In those days folk still believed in witches and trembled at a curse; and this one, falling so pat, like a wayside omen, to arrest me ere I carried out my purpose, took the pith out of my legs. I sat me down and stared at the house of Shaws. The more I looked, the pleasanter that countryside appeared, being all set with hawthorn bushes full of flowers, the fields dotted with sheep, a fine flight of rooks in the sky, and every sign of a kind soil and climate; and yet the barrack in the midst of it went sore against my fancy. Country folk went by from the fields as I sat there on the side of the ditch, but I lacked the spirit to give them a good e'en. At last the sun went down, and then, right up against the yellow sky, I saw a scroll of smoke go mounting; not much thicker, as it seemed to me, than the smoke of a candle, but still there it was, and meant a fire, and warmth, and cookery, and some living inhabitant that must have lit it; and this comforted my heart. So I set forward by a little faint track in the grass that led in my direction. It was very faint indeed to be the only way to a place of habitation, yet I saw no other. Presently it brought me to stone uprights, with an unroofed lodge beside them, and coats of arms upon the top. A main entrance it was plainly meant to be, but never finished. Instead of gates of wrought iron, a pair of hurdles were tied across with a straw rope; and as there were no park walls, nor any sign of avenue, the track that I was following passed on the right hand of the pillars, and went wandering on toward the house. The nearer I got to that, the drearier it appeared. It seemed like the one wing of a house that had never been finished. What should have been the inner end stood open on the upper floors, and showed against the sky with steps and stairs of uncompleted masonry. Many of the windows were unglazed, and bats flew in and out like doves out of a dovecote. The night had begun to fall as I got close, and in three of the lower windows, which were very high up and narrow, and well barred, the changing light of a little fire began to glimmer. Was this the palace I had been coming to? Was it within these walls that I was to seek new friends and begin great fortunes? Why, in my father's house on Essen Waterside, the fire and the bright lights would show a mile away, and the door open to a beggar's knock. I came forward cautiously, and giving ear as I came, heard some one rattling with dishes, and a little dry, eager cough that came in fits; but there was no sound of speech, and not a dog barked. The door, as well as I could see it in the dim light, was a great piece of wood all studded with nails, and I lifted my hand with a faint heart under my jacket, and knocked once. Then I stood and waited. The house had fallen into a dead silence. A whole minute passed away, and nothing stirred but the bats overhead. I knocked again and hearkened again. By this time my ears had grown so accustomed to the quiet that I could hear the ticking of the clock inside as it slowly counted out the seconds; but whoever was in that house kept deadly still, and must have held his breath. I was in two minds whether to run away, but anger got the upper hand, and I began instead to rain kicks and buffets on the door, and to shout aloud for Mr. Balfour. I was in full career, when I heard the cough right overhead, and jumping back and looking up, beheld a man's head in a tall nightcap, and the bell mouth of a blunderbuss at one of the first-story windows. "It's loaded," said a voice. "I have come here with a letter," I said, "to Mr. Ebenezer Balfour of Shaws. Is he here?" "From whom is it?" asked the man with the blunderbuss. "That is neither here nor there," said I, for I was growing very wroth. "Well," was the reply, "ye can put it down upon the doorstep and be off with ye." "I will do no such thing," I cried. "I will deliver it into Mr. Balfour's hands, as it was meant I should. It is a letter of introduction." "A what?" cried the voice sharply. I repeated what I had said. "Who are ye yourself?" was the next question, after a considerable pause. "I'm not ashamed of my name," said I. "They call me David Balfour." At that I made sure the man started, for I heard the blunderbuss rattle on the window sill, and it was after quite a long pause, and with a curious change of voice, that the next question followed. "Is your father dead?" I was so much surprised at this, that I could find no voice to answer, but stood staring. "Ay," the man resumed, "he'll be dead, no doubt, and that'll be what brings ye chapping to my door." Another pause, and then defiantly, "Well, man," he said, "I'll let ye in." And he disappeared from the window. End of chapter. Chapter 3 of Kidnapped. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 3. I make acquaintance of my uncle. Presently there came a great rattling of chains and bolts, and the door was cautiously opened and shut to again behind me as soon as I had passed.
"Go into the kitchen and touch naething,"
said the voice, and while the person of the house set himself to replacing the defences of the door, I groped my way forward and entered the kitchen. The fire had burned up fairly bright, and showed me the barest room I think I ever put my eyes on. Half a dozen dishes stood upon the shelves. The table was laid for supper with a bowl of porridge, a horn spoon, and a cup of small beer. Besides what I have named, there was not another thing in that great stone-vaulted, empty chamber but lock-fast chests arranged along the wall, and a corner cupboard with a padlock. As soon as the last chain was up, the man rejoined me. He was a mean, stooping, narrow-shouldered, clay-faced creature, and his age might have been anything between 50 and 70. His nightcap was of flannel, and so was the nightgown that he wore, instead of coat and waistcoat over his ragged shirt. He was long unshaved, but what most distressed and even daunted me, he would neither take his eyes away from me nor look me fairly in the face. What he was, whether by trade or birth, was more than I could fathom, but he seemed most like an old, unprofitable serving man, who should have been left in charge of that big house upon board wages.
"Are ye sharp set?"
he asked, glancing at about the level of my knee.
"Ye can eat that drop parritch?"
I said I feared it was his own supper.
"Oh," said he, "I can do fine wanting it. I'll take the ale, though, for it slockens my cough."
He drank the cup about half out, still keeping an eye upon me as he drank, and then suddenly held out his hand.
"Let's see the letter," said he.
I told him the letter was for Mr. Balfour, not for him.
"And who do you think I am?" says he. "Give me Alexander's letter."
"You know my father's name?"
"It would be strange if I didna," he returned, "for he was my born brother; and little as ye seem to like either me or my house or my good parritch, I'm your born uncle, Davie, my man, and you my born nephew. So give us the letter and sit down and fill your kite."
If I had been some years younger, what with shame, weariness, and disappointment, I believe I had burst into tears. As it was, I could find no words, neither black nor white, but handed him the letter, and sat down to the porridge with as little appetite for meat as ever a young man had. Meanwhile my uncle, stooping over the fire, turned the letter over and over in his hands.
"Do ye ken what's in it?"
he asked suddenly. "You see for yourself, sir," said I, "that the seal has not been broken."
"Ay," said he, "but what brought ye here?"
"To give the letter," said I.
"No," says he, cunningly, "but you'll have some hopes, nae doubt."
"I confess, sir," said I, "when I was told that I had kinsfolk well to do, I did indeed indulge the hope that they might help me in my life. But I am no beggar. I look for no favours at your hands, and I want none that are not freely given. For as poor as I appear, I have friends of my own that will be blithe to help me."
"Hoot toot!" said Uncle Ebenezer. "Dinna fly up in the snuff at me. We'll agree fine yet. And Davie, my man, if you're done with that bit of parritch, I could just take a sup of it myself. Ay," he continued, as soon as he had ousted me from the stool and spoon, "they're fine halesome food. They're grand food, parritch." He murmured a little grace to himself, and fell to. "Your father was very fond of his meat, I mind. He was a hearty, if not a great eater; but as for me, I could never do more'n pike at food."
He took a pull at the small beer, which probably reminded him of hospitable duties, for his next speech ran thus:
"If you're dry, you'll find water behind the door."
To this I returned no answer, standing stiffly on my 2 feet, and looking down upon my uncle with a mighty angry heart. He, on his part, continued to eat like a man under some pressure of time, and to throw out little darting glances now at my shoes and now at my homespun stockings. Once only, when he had ventured to look a little higher, our eyes met, and no thief taken with a hand in a man's pocket could have shown more lively signals of distress. This set me in a muse, whether his timidity arose from too long a disuse of any human company, or whether perhaps, upon a little trial, it might pass off, and my uncle change into an altogether different man. From this I was awakened by his sharp voice. "Your father's been long dead?" he asked. 3 weeks, sir," said I. "He was a secret man, Alexander, a secret, silent man," he continued. "He never said muckle when he was young. He never have spoken muckle of me?" "I never knew, sir, till you told it me yourself, that he had any brother." Dear me," said Ebenezer. "Nor yet of Shaws, I dare say?" "Not so much as the name, sir," said I. "To think of that," said he. "A strange nature of a man." For all that, he seemed singularly satisfied; but whether with himself, or me, or with this conduct of my father's, was more than I could read. Certainly, however, he seemed to be outgrowing that distaste or ill will that he had conceived at first against my person, for presently he jumped up, came across the room behind me, and hit me a smack upon the shoulder. "We'll agree fine yet," he cried. "I'm just as glad I let you in. And now come away to your bed." To my surprise, he lit no lamp or candle, but set forth into the dark passage, groped his way, breathing deeply, up a flight of steps, and paused before a door, which he unlocked. I was close upon his heels, having stumbled after him as best I might, and then he bade me go in, for that was my chamber. I did as he bid, but paused after a few steps, and begged a light to go to bed with. "Hoot toot!" said Uncle Ebenezer. "There's a fine moon." "Neither moon nor stars, sir, and pit mirk," said I. "I cannae see the bed." "Hoot toot, hoot toot!" said he. "Lights in a house is a thing I dinna agree with. I'm unco afeard of fires. Good night to ye, Davie, my man." And before I had time to add a further protest, he pulled the door to, and I heard him lock me in from the outside. I did not know whether to laugh or cry. The room was as cold as a well, and the bed, when I had found my way to it, as damp as a peat hag; but by good fortune I had caught up my bundle and my plaid, and rolling myself in the latter, I lay down upon the floor under lee of the big bedstead, and fell speedily asleep. With the first peep of day I opened my eyes, to find myself in a great chamber, hung with stamped leather, furnished with fine embroidered furniture, and lit by 3 fair windows. 10 years ago, or perhaps 20, it must have been as pleasant a room to lie down or to awake in as a man could wish; but damp, dirt, disuse, and the mice and spiders had done their worst since then. Many of the window panes, besides, were broken; and indeed this was so common a feature in that house, that I believe my uncle must at some time have stood a siege from his indignant neighbours, perhaps with Jennet Clouston at their head. Meanwhile the sun was shining outside, and being very cold in that miserable room, I knocked and shouted till my jailor came and let me out. He carried me to the back of the house, where there was a draw well, and told me to wash my face there, if I wanted. And when that was done, I made the best of my own way back to the kitchen, where he had lit the fire and was making the porridge. The table was laid with 2 bowls and 2 horn spoons, but the same single measure of small beer. Perhaps my eye rested on this particular with some surprise, and perhaps my uncle observed it, for he spoke up as if in answer to my thought, asking me if I would like to drink ale, for so he called it. I told him such was my habit, but not to put himself about. "Na, na," said he, "I'll deny ye nothing in reason." He fetched another cup from the shelf, and then to my great surprise, instead of drawing more beer, he poured an accurate half from one cup to the other. There was a kind of nobleness in this that took my breath away. If my uncle was certainly a miser, he was one of that thorough breed that goes near to make the vice respectable. When we had made an end of our meal, my Uncle Ebenezer unlocked a drawer, and drew out of it a clay pipe and a lump of tobacco, from which he cut one fill before he locked it up again. Then he sat down in the sun at one of the windows and silently smoked. From time to time his eyes came coasting round to me, and he shot me out one of his questions. Once it was, "And your mother?" And when I had told him that she too was dead, "Ay, she was a bonny lassie." Then, after another long pause, "Where were these friends of yours?" I told him they were different gentlemen of the name of Campbell, though, indeed, there was only one, and that the minister, that had ever taken the least note of me; but I began to think my uncle made too light of my position, and finding myself all alone with him, I did not wish him to suppose me helpless. He seemed to turn this over in his mind, and then, "Davy, my man," said he, "you've come to the right bit when you come to your Uncle Ebenezer. I've a great notion of the family, and I mean to do the right by you. But while I'm taking a bit of think to myself of what's the best thing to put you to, whether the law, or the meenistry, or maybe the army, whilk is what boys are fondest of. I wouldnae like the Balfours to be humbled before a wheen Highland Campbells, and I'll ask you to keep your tongue within your teeth. Nae letters, nae messages, no kind of work to anybody, or else there's my door." "Uncle Ebenezer," said I, "I've no manner of reason to suppose you mean anything but well by me. For all that, I would have you to know that I have a pride of my own. It was by no will of mine that I came seeking you, and if you show me your door again, I'll take you at the word." He seemed grievously put out. "Hoot toot!" said he. "Cacanny, man, cacanny! Bide a day or two. I'm no warlock, to find a fortune for you in the bottom of a parritch bowl; but just you give me a day or two, say nothing to nobody, and I'm as sure, I'll do the right by you." "Very well," said I. "Enough said. But you want to help me, there's no doubt but I'll be glad of it, and none but I'll be grateful." It seemed to me, too soon, I dare say, that I was getting the upper hand of my uncle, and I began next to say that I must have the bed and bedclothes aired and put to sun dry, for nothing would make me sleep in such a pickle. "Is this my house or yours?" said he in his keen voice, and then all of a sudden broke off. "Na, said he, "I dinna mean that. What's mine is yours, Davy, my man, and what's yours is mine. Blood's thicker than water, and there's nobody but you and me that ought the name." And then on he rambled about the family, and its ancient greatness, and his father that began to enlarge the house, and himself that stopped the building as a sinful waste; and this put it in my head to give him Jennet Clouston's message. "The limmer!" he cried. 1215! That's every day since I had the limmer ropted. Dod, David, I'll have her roasted on red peats before I'm by with it. A witch! A proclaimed witch! I'll off and see the session clerk." With that he opened a chest, and got out a very old and well preserved blue coat and waistcoat, and a good enough beaver hat, both without lace. These he threw on anyway, and taking a staff from the cupboard, locked all up again, and was for setting out, when a thought arrested him. "I cannot leave ye by yourself in the house," said he. "I have to lock ye out." The blood came to my face. "If you lock me out," I said, "it'll be the last you'll see of me in friendship." He turned very pale, and sucked his mouth in. "This is no the way," he said, looking wickedly at a corner of the floor. "This is no the way to win my favour, David." "Sir," says I, "with a proper reverence for your age and our common blood, I do not value your favour at a bottle's purchase. I was brought up to have a good conceit of myself,
and if you were all the uncle and all the family I had in the world 10 times over, I wouldn't buy your liking at such prices." Uncle Ebenezer went and looked out of the window for a while. I could see him all trembling and twitching like a man with palsy, but when he turned round he had a smile upon his face. "Well, well," said he, "we must bear and forbear. I'll no go. That's all to be said of it." "Uncle Ebenezer," I said, "I can make nothing out of this. You use me like a thief. You hate to have me in this house; you let me see it, every word and every minute. It's not possible that you can like me; and as for me, I've spoken to you as I've never thought to speak to any man. Why do you seek to keep me, then? Let me gang back to the friends I have, and that like me." "Na, na, na, na," he said, very earnestly. "I like ye fine; we'll agree fine yet; and for the honour of the house I couldnae let ye leave the way ye came. Bide here quiet, there's a good lad; just you bide here quiet a bitty, and you'll find that we agree." "Well, sir," said I, after I had thought the matter out in silence, "I'll stay a while. It's more just I should be helped by my own blood than strangers; and if we don't agree, I'll do my best it shall be through no fault of mine." End of chapter. Chapter 4 of Kidnapped. This is the LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 4. I Run a Great Danger in the House of Shaws. For a day that was begun so ill, the day passed fairly well. We had the porridge cold again at noon, and hot porridge at night. Porridge and small beer was my uncle's diet. He spoke but little, and that in the same way as before, shooting a question at me after a long silence, and when I sought to lead him to talk about my future, slipped out of it again. In a room next door to the kitchen, where he suffered me to go, I found a great number of books, both Latin and English, in which I took great pleasure all the afternoon. Indeed, the time passed so lightly in this good company that I began to be almost reconciled to my residence at Shaws, and nothing but the sight of my uncle, and his eyes playing hide and seek with mine, revived the force of my distrust. One thing I discovered, which put me in some doubt. There was an entry on the fly-leaf of a chap-book, one of Patrick Walker's, plainly written by my father's hand, and thus conceived: "To my brother Ebenezer on his 5th birthday." Now what puzzled me was this, that, as my father was of course the younger brother, he must either have made some strange error, or he must have written, before he was yet 5, an excellent, clear, manly hand of writing. I tried to get this out of my head. But though I took down many interesting authors, old and new, history, poetry, and story book, this notion of my father's hand of writing stuck to me, and when at length I went back into the kitchen, and sat down once more to porridge and small beer, the first thing I said to Uncle Ebenezer was to ask him if my father had not been very quick at his book. "Alexander? No him," was the reply. "I was far quicker myself. I was a clever chappie when I was young. Why, I could read as soon as he could." This puzzled me yet more, and a thought coming into my head, I asked if he and my father had been twins. He jumped upon his stool, and the horn spoon fell out of his hand upon the floor. "What gars ye ask that?" he said, and he caught me by the breast of the jacket, and looked this time straight into my eyes. His own were little and light, and bright like a bird's, blinking and winking strangely. "What do you mean?" I asked very calmly, for I was far stronger than he, and not easily frightened. "Take your hand from my jacket. This is no way to behave." My uncle seemed to make a great effort upon himself. "Dod, man, David," he said. "You shouldnae speak to me about your father. That's where the mistake is." He sat a while and shook, blinking in his plate. "He was all the brother that ever I had," he added, with no heart in his voice; and then he caught up his spoon and fell to supper again, but still shaking. Now this last passage, this laying of hands upon my person and sudden profession of love for my dead father, went so clean beyond my comprehension that it put me into both fear and hope. On the one hand, I began to think my uncle was perhaps insane, and might be dangerous; on the other, there came up into my mind, quite unbidden by me and even discouraged, a story like some ballad I had heard folk singing, of a poor lad that was a rightful heir, and a wicked kinsman that tried to keep him from his own. But why should my uncle play a part with a relative that came almost a beggar to his door, unless in his heart he had some cause to fear him? With this notion, all unacknowledged, but nevertheless getting firmly settled in my head, I now began to imitate his covert looks, so that we sat at table like a cat and a mouse, each stealthily observing the other. Not another word had he to say to me, black or white, but he was busy turning something secretly over in his mind; and the longer we sat and the more I looked at him, the more certain I became that the something was unfriendly to myself. When he had cleared the platter, he got out a single pipeful of tobacco, just as in the morning, turned round a stool into the chimney corner, and sat a while smoking, with his back to me. "Davy," he said, at length, "I've been thinking." Then he paused, and said it again. "There's a wee bit siller that I half promised ye before ye was born," he continued. "Promised it to your father. Oh, nothing legal, you understand, just gentlemen daffing at their wine. Well, I keepit that bit of money separate. It was a great expense, but a promise is a promise, and it has grown by now to be a matter of just exactly," and here he paused and stumbled, "just exactly £40." This last he rapped out with a sidelong glance over his shoulder, and the next moment he added, almost with a scream, "Scots!" The pound Scots being the same thing as an English shilling, the difference made by this second thought was considerable. I could see, besides, that the whole story was a lie, invented with some end which it puzzled me to guess; and I made no attempt to conceal the tone of raillery in which I answered, "Oh, think again, sir. Pounds sterling, I believe." "That's what I said," returned my uncle. "Pounds sterling. And if you'll step out by to the door a minute, just to see what kind of a night it is, I'll get it out to you, and call ye in again." I did his will, smiling to myself in my contempt that he should think I was so easily to be deceived. It was a dark night, with a few stars low down, and as I stood just outside the door, I heard a hollow moaning of wind far off among the hills. I said to myself there was something thundery and changeful in the weather, and little knew of what a vast importance that should prove to me before the evening passed. When I was called in again, my uncle counted out into my hand 37 golden guinea pieces; the rest was in his hand in small gold and silver, but his heart failed him there, and he crammed the change into his pocket. "There," said he, "that'll show you. I'm a queer man, and strange with strangers; but my word is my bond, and there's the proof of it." Now, my uncle seemed so miserly that I was struck dumb by this sudden generosity, and could find no words in which to thank him. "Not a word," he said. "Nae thanks; I want nae thanks. I do my duty. I'm no saying that everybody would have done it; but for my part, though I'm a careful body too, it's a pleasure to me to do the right by my brother's son, and it's a pleasure to me to think that now we'll agree, as such near friends should." I spoke him in return as handsomely as I was able, but all the while I was wondering what would come next, and why he had parted with his precious guineas; for as to the reason he had given, a baby would have refused it. Presently he looked towards me sideways. "And see here," says he, "tit for tat."
I told him I was ready to prove my gratitude in any reasonable degree, and then waited, looking for some monstrous demand. And yet, when at last he plucked up courage to speak, it was only to tell me, very properly as I thought, that he was growing old and a little broken, and that he would expect me to help him with the house and the bit of garden. I answered, and expressed my readiness to serve. "Well," said he, "let's begin." He pulled out of his pocket a rusty key. "There," says he, "there's the key of the stair tower at the far end of the house. Ye can only win into it from the outside, for that part of the house is no finished. Gang ye in there, and up the stairs, and bring me down the chest that's at the top. There's papers in it," he added. "Can I have a light, sir?" said I. "Na," said he, very cunningly. "No lights in my house." "Very well, sir," said I. "Are the stairs good?" "They're grand," said he; and then, as I was going, "Keep to the wall," he added. "There's no banisters, but the stairs are grand underfoot." Out I went into the night. The wind was still moaning in the distance, though never a breath of it came near the house of Shaws. It had fallen blacker than ever, and I was glad to feel along the wall, till I came the length of the stair tower door at the far end of the unfinished wing. I had got the key into the keyhole and had just turned it, when all of a sudden, without sound of wind or thunder, the whole sky lighted up with wild fire, and went black again. I had to put my hand over my eyes to get back to the colour of the darkness, and indeed I was already half blinded when I stepped into the tower. It was so dark inside, it seemed a body could scarce breathe; but I pushed out with foot and hand, and presently struck the wall with the one, and the lowermost round of the stair with the other. The wall, by the touch, was of fine hewn stone; the steps too, though somewhat steep and narrow, were of polished mason work, and regular and solid underfoot. Minding my uncle's word about the banisters, I kept close to the tower side, and felt my way in the pitch darkness with a beating heart. The house of Shaws stood some 5 full stories high, not counting lofts. Well, as I advanced, it seemed to me the stair grew airier and a thought more lightsome; and I was wondering what might be the cause of this change, when a second blink of the summer lightning came and went. If I did not cry out, it was because fear had me by the throat; and if I did not fall, it was more by Heaven's mercy than my own strength. It was not only that the flash shone in on every side through breaches in the wall, so that I seemed to be clambering aloft upon an open scaffold, but the same passing brightness showed me the steps were of unequal length, and that one of my feet rested that moment within 2 inches of the well. This was the grand stair, I thought; and with the thought a gust of a kind of angry courage came into my heart. My uncle had sent me here, certainly to run great risks, perhaps to die. I swore I would settle that perhaps, if I should break my neck for it, got me down upon my hands and knees, and as slowly as a snail, feeling before me every inch, and testing the solidity of every stone, I continued to ascend the stair. The darkness, by contrast with the flash, appeared to have redoubled; nor was that all, for my ears were now troubled and my mind confounded by a great stir of bats in the top part of the tower, and the foul beasts, flying downwards, sometimes beat about my face and body. The tower, I should have said, was square, and in every corner the step was made of a great stone of a different shape to join the flights. Well, I had come close to one of these turns, when, feeling forward as usual, my hand slipped upon an edge and found nothing but emptiness beyond it. The stair had been carried no higher. To set a stranger mounting it in the darkness was to send him straight to his death; and, although, thanks to the lightning and my own precautions, I was safe enough, the mere thought of the peril in which I might have stood, and the dreadful height I might have fallen from, brought out the sweat upon my body and relaxed my joints. But I knew what I wanted now, and turned and groped my way down again, with a wonderful anger in my heart. About halfway down, the wind sprang up in a clap, and shook the tower, and died again. The rain followed, and before I had reached the ground level it fell in buckets. I put out my head into the storm and looked along towards the kitchen. The door, which I had shut behind me when I left, now stood open and shed a little glimmer of light, and I thought I could see a figure standing in the rain, quite still, like a man hearkening. And then there came a blinding flash, which showed me my uncle plainly, just where I had fancied him to stand, and hard upon the heels of it a great tow row of thunder. Now, whether my uncle thought the crash to be the sound of my fall, or whether he heard in it God's voice denouncing murder, I will leave you to guess. Certain it is, at least, that he was seized on by a kind of panic fear, and that he ran into the house and left the door open behind him. I followed as softly as I could, and coming unheard into the kitchen, stood and watched him. He had found time to open the corner cupboard and bring out a great case bottle of aquavitae, and now sat with his back towards me at the table. Ever and again he would be seized with a fit of deadly shuddering and groan aloud, and carrying the bottle to his lips, drink down the raw spirits by the mouthful. I stepped forward, came close behind him where he sat, and suddenly clapping my two hands down upon his shoulders, "Ah!" cried I. My uncle gave a kind of broken cry like a sheep's bleat, flung up his arms, and tumbled to the floor like a dead man. I was somewhat shocked at this, but I had myself to look to first of all, and I did not hesitate to let him lie, as he had fallen. The keys were hanging in the cupboard, and it was my design to furnish myself with arms before my uncle should come again to his senses and the power of devising evil. In the cupboard were a few bottles, some apparently of medicine, a great many bills and other papers, which I should willingly enough have rummaged, had I had the time, and a few necessaries that were nothing to my purpose. Thence I turned to the chests. The first was full of meal, the second of money bags and papers tied into sheaves. In the third, with many other things, and these for the most part clothes, I found a rusty, ugly-looking Highland dirk without the scabbard. This, then, I concealed inside my waistcoat, and turned to my uncle. He lay as he had fallen, all huddled, with one knee up and one arm sprawling abroad. His face had a strange colour of blue, and he seemed to have ceased breathing. Fear came on me that he was dead. Then I got water and dashed it in his face, and with that he seemed to come a little to himself, working his mouth and fluttering his eyelids. At last he looked up and saw me, and there came into his eyes a terror that was not of this world. "Come, come," said I, "sit up." "Are ye alive?" he sobbed. "O man, are ye alive?" "That am I," said I. "Small thanks to you." He had begun to seek for his breath with deep sighs. "The blue phial," said he. "In the aumry, the blue phial." His breath came slower still. I ran to the cupboard, and sure enough found there a blue phial of medicine, with the dose written on it on a paper, and this I administered to him with what speed I might. "It's the trouble," said he, reviving a little. "I have a trouble, Davie. It's the heart." I set him on a chair and looked at him. It is true I felt some pity for a man that looked so sick, but I was full besides of righteous anger, and I numbered over before him the points on which I wanted explanation. Why he lied to me at every word, why he feared that I should leave him, why he disliked it to be hinted that he and my father were twins. "Is that because it is true?" I asked. Why he had given me money to which I was convinced I had no claim, and last of all, why he had tried to kill me. He heard me all through in silence, and then, in a broken voice, begged me to let him go to bed. "I'll tell ye the morn," he said. "As sure as death I will." And so weak was he that I could do nothing but consent. I locked him into his room, however, and pocketed the key, and then returning to the kitchen made up such a blaze as had not shone there for many a long year, and wrapping myself in my plaid,
lay down upon the chests, and fell asleep. End of chapter.
Chapter 5 of Kidnapped. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 5. I Go to the Queen's Ferry. Much rain fell in the night, and the next morning there blew a bitter wintry wind out of the northwest, driving scattered clouds. For all that, and before the sun began to peep or the last of the stars had vanished, I made my way to the side of the burn, and had a plunge in a deep whirling pool. All aglow from my bath, I sat down once more beside the fire, which I replenished, and began gravely to consider my position. There was now no doubt about my uncle's enmity. There was no doubt I carried my life in my hand, and he would leave no stone unturned that he might compass my destruction. But I was young and spirited, and like most lads that have been country bred, I had a great opinion of my shrewdness. I had come to his door no better than a beggar and little more than a child. He had met me with treachery and violence. It would be a fine consummation to take the upper hand and drive him like a herd of sheep. I sat there nursing my knee and smiling at the fire, and I saw myself in fancy smell out his secrets one after another, and grow to be that man's king and ruler. The Warlock of Essendine, they say, had made a mirror in which men could read the future. It must have been of other stuff than burning coal, for in all the shapes and pictures that I sat and gazed at, there was never a ship, never a seaman with a hairy cap, never a big bludgeon for my silly head, or the least sign of all those tribulations that were ripe to fall on me. Presently, all swollen with conceit, I went upstairs and gave my prisoner his liberty. He gave me good morning civilly, and I gave the same to him, smiling down upon him from the heights of my sufficiency. Soon we were set to breakfast as it might have been the day before. "Well, sir," said I, with a jeering tone, "have you nothing more to say to me?" And then, as he made no articulate reply, "It will be time, I think, to understand each other," I continued. "You took me for a country Johnny Raw, with no more mother wit or courage than a porridge stick. I took you for a good man, or no worse than others at the least. It seems we were both wrong. What cause have you to fear me, to cheat me, and to attempt my life?" He murmured something about a jest, and that he liked a bit of fun, and then, seeing me smile, changed his tone, and assured me he would make all clear as soon as we had breakfasted. I saw by his face that he had no lie ready for me, though he was hard at work preparing one, and I think I was about to tell him so, when we were interrupted by knocking at the door. Bidding my uncle sit where he was, I went to open it, and found on the doorstep a half-grown boy in sea-clothes. He had no sooner seen me than he began to dance some steps of the sea hornpipe, which I had never before heard of, far less seen, snapping his fingers in the air and footing it right cleverly. For all that, he was blue with the cold, and there was something in his face, a look between tears and laughter, that was highly pathetic and consisted ill with this gaiety of manner. "What cheer, mate?" says he, with a cracked voice. I asked him soberly to name his pleasure. "Oh, pleasure," says he, and then began to sing, "For it's my delight of a shiny night in the season of the year." "Well," says I, "if you have no business at all, I will even be so unmannerly as to shut you out." "Stay, brother," he cried. "Have you no fun about you, or do you want to get me thrashed? I've brought a letter from old Hesiosi to Mr. Bellflower." He showed me a letter as he spoke. "And I say, mate," he added, "I'm mortal hungry." "Well," said I, "come into the house, and you shall have a bite if I go empty for it." With that I brought him in, and set him down to my own place, where he fell to greedily on the remains of breakfast, winking to me between whiles, and making many faces, which I think the poor soul considered manly. Meanwhile my uncle had read the letter and sat thinking; then, suddenly, he got to his feet with a great air of liveliness, and pulled me apart into the farthest corner of the room. "Read that," said he, and put the letter in my hand. Here it is, lying before me as I write. The Hawes Inn at the Queen's Ferry. Sir, I lie here with my hawser up and down, and send my cabin boy to inform. If you have any further commands for overseas, today will be the last occasion, as the wind will serve us well out of the Firth. I will not seek to deny that I have had crosses with your doer, Mr. Rankeillor, of which, if not speedily redd up, you may look to see some losses follow. I have drawn a bill upon you, as per margin, and am, sir, your most obedient humble servant, Elias Hoseason, Agent. "You see, Davy," resumed my uncle, as soon as he saw that I had done, "I have a venture with this man Hoseason, the captain of a trading brig, the Covenant, of Dysart. Now, if you and me was to walk over with yon lad, I could see the captain of the Hawes, and maybe on board the Covenant if there were papers to be signed, and so far from a loss of time, we can jog on to the lawyer, Mr. Rankeillor's. After that's come and gone, ye would be swire to believe me upon my naked word. But you'll believe Rankeillor. He's factor to half the gentry in these parts, an old man, forby, highly respected, and he kenned your father." I stood a while in thought. I was going to some place of shipping which was doubtless populous, and where my uncle durst attempt no violence; and indeed even the society of the cabin boy so far protected me. Once there, I believed I could force on the visit to the lawyer, even if my uncle were now insincere in proposing it; and perhaps in the bottom of my heart I wished a nearer view of the sea and ships. You are to remember I had lived all my life in the inland hills, and just 2 days before had my first sight of the Firth lying like a blue floor, and the sailed ships moving on the face of it, no bigger than toys. One thing with another, I made up my mind. "Very well," says I, "let us go to the ferry." My uncle got into his hat and coat, and buckled an old rusty cutlass on, and then we trod the fire out, locked the door, and set forth upon our walk. The wind, being in that cold quarter the northwest, blew nearly in our faces as we went. It was the month of June; the grass was all white with daisies, and the trees with blossoms; but to judge by our blue nails and aching wrists, the time might have been winter and the whiteness of December frost. Uncle Ebenezer trudged in the ditch, jogging from side to side like an old ploughman coming home from work. He never said a word the whole way, and I was thrown for talk on the cabin boy. He told me his name was Ransom, and that he had followed the sea since he was 9, but could not say how old he was, as he had lost his reckoning. He showed me tattoo marks, bearing his breast in the teeth of the wind, and in spite of my remonstrances, for I thought it was enough to kill him. He swore horribly whenever he remembered, but more like a silly schoolboy than a man, and boasted of many wild and bad things that he had done, stealthy thefts, false accusations, ay, and even murder, but all with such a dearth of likelihood in the details, and such a weak and crazy swagger in the delivery, as disposed me rather to pity than to believe him. I asked him of the brig, which he declared was the finest ship that sailed, and of Captain Hoseason, in whose praises he was equally loud. Heasiosi, for so he still named the skipper, was a man, by his account, that minded for nothing either in heaven or earth, one that, as people said, would crack on all sail into the day of judgment, rough, fierce, unscrupulous, and brutal; and all this my poor cabin boy had taught himself to admire as something seamanlike and manly. He would only admit one flaw in his idol. "He ain't no seaman," he admitted. "That's Mr. Shuan that navigates the bridge. He's the finest seaman in the trade, only for drink. and I tell you I believe it. Why, look here!" And turning down his stocking, he showed me a great, raw, red wound that made my blood run cold. "He done that. Mr. Shuan did that," he said with an air of pride. "What!" I cried. "Do you take such savage usage at his hands? Why, you're no slave to be so handled." "No," said the poor moon calf, changing his tune at once. "And so he'll find, see here." And he showed me a great case knife, which he told me was stolen. "Oh," says he, "let him see me try. I dare him to. I'll do for him. Oh, he ain't the first." And he confirmed it with a poor, silly, ugly oath. I have never felt such pity for any one in this wide world as I felt for that half-witted creature, and it began to come over me that the brig Covenant, for all her pious name, was little better than a hell upon the seas. "Have you no friends?" said I. He said he had a father in some English seaport, I forget which. "He was a fine man too," he said, "but he's dead." "In Heaven's name," cried I, "can you find no reputable life on shore?" "Oh, no," says he, winking and looking very sly. "They would put me to a trade. I know a trick worth two of that, I do." I asked him what trade could be so dreadful as the one he followed, where he ran the continual peril of his life, not alone from wind and sea, but by the horrid cruelty of those who were his masters. He said it was very true, and then began to praise the life, and tell what a pleasure it was to get on shore with money in his pocket, and spend it like a man, and buy apples, and swagger, and surprise what he called stick-in-the-mud boys. "And then it's not all as bad as that," says he. "There's worse off than me. There's the 20-pounders. Oh, laws, you should see them taking on. Why, I've seen a man as old as you, I dessay." To him I seemed old. "Ah, and he had a beard too. Well, and as soon as we cleared out of the river, and he had the drug out of his head, my, how he cried and carried on! I made a fine fool of him, I tell you. But then there's little uns too. Oh, little by me! I tell you, I keep them in order. When we carry little uns, I've a rope's end of my own to wallop 'em." And so he ran on, until it came in on me what he meant by 20-pounders were those unhappy criminals who were sent overseas to slavery in North America, or the still more unhappy innocents who were kidnapped or trepanned, as the word went, for private interest or vengeance. Just then we came to the top of the hill and looked down on the ferry and the Hope. The Firth of Forth, as is very well known, narrows at this point to the width of a good-sized river, which makes a convenient ferry going north, and turns the upper reach into a landlocked haven for all manner of ships. Right in the midst of the narrows lies an islet with some ruins. On the south shore they have built a pier for the service of the ferry, and at the end of the pier, on the other side of the road, and backed against a pretty garden of holly trees and hawthorns, I could see the building which they called the Hawes Inn. The town of Queensferry lies further west, and the neighbourhood of the inn looked pretty lonely at that time of day, for the boat had just gone north with passengers. A skiff, however, lay beside the pier, with some seamen sleeping on the thwarts. This, as Ransome told me, was the brig's boat waiting for the captain, and about half a mile off, and all alone in the anchorage, he showed me the Covenant herself. There was a sea-going bustle on board, yards were swinging into place, and as the wind blew from that quarter, I could hear the song of the sailors as they pulled upon the ropes. After all I had listened to upon the way, I looked at that ship with an extreme abhorrence, and from the bottom of my heart I pitied all poor souls that were condemned to sail in her. We had all three pulled up on the brow of the hill, and now I marched across the road and addressed my uncle. "I think it right to tell you, sir," says I, "there's nothing that will bring me on board that Covenant." He seemed to waken from a dream. "Eh?" he said. "What's that?" I told him over again. "Well, well," he said, "we'll have to please ye, I suppose. But what are we standing here for? It's perishing cold.
And if I'm no mistaken, they're busking the Covenant for sea." Chapter